can be your worst threat, or they can be your biggest asset. And so they need to be aware of what the threats are, kind of like what we're doing today. What are the threats? Where are they coming from? They need to know about what phishing is and what spear phishing is. Who knows what phishing is? Going out for bass? Okay. Phishing is, you'll see these emails that say they're from UPS or Bank of America or Amazon or eBay or any number of companies, and they look legitimate, but they're not. They're fake, and they're trying to get you to click and type in a username and password and steal your information. Spear phishing is a little more sinister because it's a directly targeted attack. And it doesn't start with spear phishing, but we'll talk about that in a second. So spear phishing is they're looking for specific information from a specific company or a specific individual. So they will tailor emails that look like they're from your boss or your coworker and say, hey, Dorothy, I need this and this information. Could you send it over to me? And, oh, sure. Boop. It's easy enough to do. The way they get the information for a spear phishing attack is quite often through social engineering. They'll scour Facebook and Twitter and any of the social media sites and collect information about employees within a company. And then they'll do phone calls and worm their way in until they get enough information to put together an email that really looks legitimate. So you need to be really careful about the information that you're putting out on social media, who it's available to. Check those privacy settings on Facebook. Make sure you're not sharing your entire life with the entire world, because they can put little personal information in that email, so you're sure it's coming from the right person, and cause all kinds of problems. Make sure they're aware of those phishing emails, other fake emails, internet links, and flash drives. I like to call flash drives, everybody loves flash drives because they're small, they're cheap, they carry a lot of information. I like to call them DLUs, data loss units, because that's what they're good for. Because they're small, they're easy to lose, and it's easy to put some information on them and then forget where it is. I don't know how many of them I've lost, but bearing that in mind, your employees need to be aware of that and be very careful about what information is stored on there. And it's also an easy way to overcome those network access controls. If your employees are saying, I don't have access to the file, can you give me a copy of it? So they put it on a flash drive and hand it to them, or they email it to them, then you've got problems. Your employees also should be aware of best practices for passwords, for network security, for answering the phone, and you should have a written set of best practices for your company so that your employees can refer to them. And network security. Am I allowed to give this information to somebody that says they don't have access to it? Well, no, they need to call the IT admin or whoever it is and get legitimate access to something. Don't be sharing data in those methods. So let's talk about backup, because we are talking about data security. Backup is really important. Everybody knows that they need to have a backup, but is having a backup enough? I want you to think about this and think about these questions when I ask you, how is your backup? How confident are you in your backup? If you have a backup, can you get your information from it? Are you sure? How secure is your backup? Is it encrypted? Can it be stolen? If your backup can be accessed, then none of your information is secure. What is backed up? Are you just backing up your data? Maybe that's enough. But if you're just backing up your data and you lose a system, then you've got to install Windows or your operating system. You've got to install your software. Do you have all the keys to activate your software? Then you have to configure your software. Then you have to put the data back in the software. So sometimes just backing up the data isn't enough. It's important, but maybe you need an entire system backed up as an image so that you can restore from it. Where are you storing your backup? Do you take it home? Do you have it in a bank vault? Is it in the same location as the rest of your data? What if you have a fire? Now you've lost your server and your backup. Has your backup been tested? And this is the one almost nobody does. This is something that's important for our company. We make sure that we actually do a restore test of our backups at least once a quarter for our customers. Because backing up the data isn't good enough. If you can't restore from that backup is completely useless. And quite often, almost every time I've ever gone to a company and asked them about their backup, is your backup tested? We think we have a backup. Somebody told us once upon a time that they were backing stuff up, so we should be good, right? And here's another key question. How long will it take you to restore from the backup? Remember those statistics we saw earlier? How long are you going to be down if you lose your server or if you lose your finance workstation? That's a really key question. Certain things, sure, you can lose it for a week and it's not a big deal. But other things, you need to have that backup within a day or preferably within a couple hours. And I like to use the symbol. Backup is a yin and yang. You can't just back it up, you have to restore it. It's two sides of the same coin. You need both in order for a backup to be effective. Any questions there? When we talk about cybersecurity, your company is only as strong as the weakest link within that chain. So evaluate your position and determine, is it my employee training? Is it my backups? Is it my antivirus? Is it my network access controls? Maybe it's my physical security. Whichever the weakest link is, that's as strong as you are. Focus on correcting that first, and that risk analysis and that risk matrix is going to help you determine that and figure out where to focus those efforts. And as soon as you fix that, something else is going to be your weakest link, and you can work on that. Okay. Do we have any questions? Because now we're going to move on to the cybersecurity framework. All righty. Cybersecurity Framework 1.1. This is basically a set of guidelines from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is, NIST is a unit of the U.S. Commerce Department. And because cybersecurity is so important, they have developed this framework, which is really just a guideline on how to implement cybersecurity for your business. It's designed to be improved over time and help you implement certain standards and things to correct issues. And you'll notice that some of these things are very familiar because they fit into a risk management framework. And it's called the Cybersecurity Framework, but you can really apply this to any type of risk management. It works across the board. So the first thing you want to do is you want to identify what are your business processes, what are your assets that need to be protected, what are the risks, and then take a look at protecting those assets and business processes. What can I put in place to prevent problems from occurring? I also need to be able to detect problems. If I don't know a problem is occurring, I'm in deep trouble. So what are the techniques that I can use to identify the incidents that are occurring? Once I do detect one, I need to respond to it. What techniques can I use to respond? And it's going to depend on the risk. Every risk is going to be different. You know, if you've got a fire, your response for a fire is obviously going to be different than your response for a hacker. And also being able to recover from an incident. If I'm not able to protect something, the incident may just be an attempt at access to your network. In that case, detection, and maybe you can lock it down before anything happens, and the response closes that threat. But sometimes, a hacker may get in and cause problems. You may get a virus that you need to deal with, or a system may fail, and in that case, then you need to implement some kind of recovery. So you want to cover the whole gamut here, not just prevention is a great place to start, and you need to have prevention measures in place, and those are very crucial. But there's no type of prevention that's foolproof, so you need to have the reaction covered as well. How do I deal with it once it does occur? Any questions? We're going to talk about the 7-step gap analysis that's contained within this framework, and it's going to be very similar in a lot of respects to the risk analysis process that we talked about earlier. The first step is to prioritize and scope our risks, identify and quantify the risks that are contained within our organization. Step 2 is to orient yourself and identify how those risks pertain to you. And we use this to create a current risk profile. Just like we did with that risk matrix, we can develop a profile of our company and say, these are our risks, these are the ones that are most serious, and here's what our company looks like at this point in time. And use that profile to conduct a risk assessment and say, oh, okay, this is kind of eye-opening. I need to focus on this right now and take care of this immediately. Then we create a target profile. Okay, here's what our risks look like right now. This is how we've determined how serious it is, and this is where we want to go. We want to reduce our risk profile, and we want to look like this. And from that, we can see where our gaps in our security are. So obviously, we want to focus on the most important, so we prioritize them and say, these are the gaps that are in the way of getting from our current profile to our target profile. And then we implement the actions to get us from that current profile to where we want to be in step 5 with the target profile. And that's basically how it works. Once we do that, once we implement that action plan and we've got that target profile in place, then we need to start over because the threat landscape changes. We've changed our organization, and so we need to do a reevaluation. This is it's not a once and done thing. You're never going to be done with this. It's like taxes. You're never done paying them. You keep doing it over and over again. Any questions on that? Yes.
If this is an ongoing process, how often or what kind of frequency is gap analysis? Or does it depend on
That's going to depend on your organization. It depends on how serious your risks are. It depends on how long it takes you to mitigate them and implement the plan. It's really going to vary greatly. Maybe every year you do this, maybe every 3 years. Maybe some of them change radically, and you need to take a look at certain risks every quarter. So it really does. It's very dependent on who you are and what you do and what organizations you interface with. Good question, though. And I've got more information up here. I know nobody wants to write down links and things, but this presentation will be available. Anybody that would like it can email me. I know the live stream, they've got my email address on there. So anybody that wants this presentation, I'll be happy to email it to you. That'll have all these links within that presentation for you to have access to. Now my favorite, NIST 800-171 compliance. And I will say that I'm not a NIST compliance expert. I have done some looking into this, and to see how it impacts us and our customers and those types of